where the whispering bamboo trees danced beside River Ioma, there lived a man whose name was spoken in both awe and pity. Zuberi. He was the village's pride, tall, dark-skinned, chiseled like the deities carved in the shrine of Umuocha. A humble woodcarver by trade, Zuberi could lift logs that three men together could not move. His strength was unmatched, his character noble, and his hands generous. But behind the songs sung in his name and the admiring glances of maidens lay a sorrow few could fathom. Zuberi carried a burden of manhood so unusually large that no woman could withstand his touch. What was meant to be a sign of virility became the cause of his deepest isolation. Whispers filled the village after failed courtships, and one by one the women who admired him retreated in fear. And even his own mother, Mama Oloma, a revered widow, would often sit with him beneath the large udala tree and say, "My son, perhaps the gods gave you a gift meant not for pleasure, but for purpose." Yet Zuberi longed not for lust, but for connection, for love, for a companion who could see past the body that imprisoned him. Then came Obianuju. She was the daughter of a traveling merchant, blessed with wit, grace, and eyes that lit up like sunrise on River Ioma. She spoke boldly and walked with a confidence that made even the elders pause. When she arrived in Oduala during the planting season, many young men tried to woo her, but it was Zuberi who caught her gaze. Every morning he would carve small animal figurines and leave them at her door. He stood by her farm when her brothers were away. He serenaded her gently beneath the moonlight, his deep voice blending with the night crickets. The village watched as Obianuju's heart began to soften, charmed by his patience, not his strength. And after 3 moons, she accepted his proposal. The village erupted in celebration, drums beat through the night, dancers twirled with palm fronds, and old women ululated till their throats cracked. "The curse is broken," some whispered, but the night of their union brought no joy. In the privacy of Zuberi's hut, as he undressed with trembling hope, Obianuju froze. What she saw filled her not with passion, but with terror. Her body went cold, her breath caught in her chest, and she screamed. She fled into the night, barefoot and sobbing, past the very people who had danced in her honor. Villagers gathered as torches lit up the darkness. Shame fell upon Zuberi like a storm cloud. He sat alone in the dark, eyes filled with tears. He had not cried since his father drowned in the river. His greatest hope had become his greatest humiliation. By morning, Obianuju's family had returned her to the city, and the rumors began again. But this time they stung deeper. Even the children sang cruel songs. And Zuberi, once the pride of Oduala, withdrew into silence, into loneliness, into questions no elder could answer. But the gods had not finished his story. The seasons shifted. What once was green and bountiful in Oduala began to wither. The sacred river Ioma, lifeblood of the village for drinking, for farming, for rituals, began to shrink. First the fish died, then the children started falling ill. And one morning the villagers awoke to find that the river had dried completely, its cracked bed gaping like an ancient wound. Panic spread. The elders gathered in the House of Horns, the circular thatched shrine where decisions were made. Elder Chief Okafor, the oldest man in the village, stood beside the river priest whose body was painted in chalk and ash. "This is no ordinary drought," the priest said, his voice grave. "The gods are angry. The covenant of Umuocha has been broken. But there is a way." He reached into his goat-hide satchel and pulled out a scroll made of dry palm parchment. On it was a prophecy passed down through generations, one that spoke of a man of great strength, carrying the burden of the ancestors, whose body was marked for divine use. All eyes turned slowly to Zuberi, who had been sitting in the shadows, barely noticed. A murmur rippled across the room. Some villagers bowed their heads in shame, recalling how they had mocked him. Others stared in disbelief, but Zuberi's heart pounded with fear. "Me?" he whispered. "I am the shame of this village, the one women run from. How can I be your salvation?" Chief Okafor rose and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes the very thing that breaks a man is what the gods use to rebuild the world." That night, Zuberi stood alone by the cracked banks of River Ioma, facing the shrine carved into the river rock. According to the scroll, the ritual to restore the river required the full presence of the vessel body, soul, and spirit. It was not enough to simply believe. He had to offer himself, the part of him he had most despised, as a sacred key to unlock the waters. With trembling hands, he stripped himself, his body glowing in the moonlight. He stepped barefoot into the dust where water once flowed and knelt before the shrine. He chanted the words the priest had taught him, words older than memory. At first, nothing happened. But then, a gust of wind howled through the trees. The earth trembled slightly. A distant rumble echoed beneath the soil. Then, from the base of the riverbed, a trickle of water emerged, glowing with faint blue light. The trickle became a stream. The stream became a gush. The gush became a river. River Ioma had returned. By sunrise, Oduala was alive again. Children splashed in the water. Women cried and sang praises. And the same villagers who once mocked Zuberi now carried him on their shoulders, hailing him as the river son, the chosen of the gods. He was given the largest hut in the village, crowned with red feathers of honor, and appointed a chief in waiting by the elders. But Zuberi's heart, though celebrated, remained hollow. Even now, with all his glory, he could not touch or be touched. Until a message came, one that would change everything. A royal envoy from Kalimba Kingdom. Far across the burning northern sands and beneath the spires of the great Kalimba Kingdom, Princess Halima sat in her gilded chamber, staring out at the horizon with eyes full of longing. From birth, she had lived under a cruel shadow, a curse cast by a jealous river witch who envied her beauty and future. The curse was simple but devastating. No man shall ever know you fully. No touch shall satisfy. No love shall endure unless he is chosen by the gods themselves. From the age of 14, Halima had watched suitors come and go, princes, warriors, even scholars. None could satisfy her. Some ran, others tried again, only to weep in confusion and failure. The curse humiliated her and hardened her. Her people called her the Veiled Jewel, a title that sounded poetic but masked her pain. Now in her mid-20s, Halima's once sickly father, Emir Bakari, had returned from the edge of death after drinking from the enchanted spring near their palace mosque. The healers declared his life extended for only a few more moons, enough to settle unfinished matters. One evening, as the call to prayer echoed through the golden walls, Halima brought her father his herbal brew. "Father," she said softly, "you promised me a final wish." Emir Bakari, wrapped in his blue robes, smiled faintly. "Speak it, my daughter. The stars are listening." Halima knelt beside him, voice trembling. "I've heard tales from the southern lands of a man named Zuberi in a village called Oduala. They say the gods marked him, that his body carries a burden no woman has ever endured. But I wonder, if perhaps I too carry a burden no man has ever satisfied, then maybe our wounds are the key to one another." Bakari's brows furrowed, but he saw a flame of hope in his daughter's eyes, a flame he had not seen in years. "You wish to summon him?" "I do." And so the emir summoned his best horsemen and scribes. They penned a golden scroll bearing the seal of Kalimba and sent messengers southward. But when the riders arrived in Oduala days later, bearing velvet boxes, camels adorned with bells, and silk garments as gifts, Zuberi refused. "I do not trust kingdoms," he said. "I am done being used for amusement. I will not parade myself again." The royal messengers left disappointed. But Halima did not give up. "If he will not come to Kalimba," she said, rising from her cushioned seat, "then I shall go to him." Her father, stunned, agreed. And so it was that a royal entourage with dancers, cattle, guards, veiled maidens, and gold-laden camels began a majestic journey from Kalimba to Oduala. The desert met the forest, and the villagers of Oduala gasped when they saw Princess Halima step down from her royal cart, radiant and veiled, her aura unlike anything they had seen. And when Zuberi laid eyes on her, something ancient stirred inside him. Her presence was like moonlight meeting still water. His heart pounded, but he said nothing. They would speak in private, after the villagers rested. But fate, as always, had other plans that would unfold not in daylight, but under the watchful eyes of the river spirits. The royal visitors settled in Zuberi's grand compound that evening, their camels resting near the wooden fences, their guards blending with curious villagers who gathered to admire the riches from Kalimba. Princess Halima remained veiled, her graceful movements stirring whispers among the women of Oduala. Zuberi could barely eat during the welcome feast. He felt restless, pulled by something he could not explain. As the drums faded and the village fell asleep, he slipped quietly from his hut, drawn to the river like a man summoned in a dream. The river Ioma shimmered under the moonlight, its surface calm, its sacred stones glistening like ancestral eyes. As Zuberi approached the familiar riverbank, he saw her. A figure slender, glowing, and ethereal, bathed in the silver water. Her naked dark skin glistened as she moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a goddess. Her thick coiled hair draped like a royal crown over her shoulders. His breath caught. He could not see her face clearly, but something deep within him stirred. She did not run. She did not tremble. Instead, she turned her body towards him, her arms reaching out, her silence inviting him closer. Compelled beyond reason, Zuberi undressed, stepping into the cool water that lapped gently around his waist. As he neared her, his heart thudded in his chest. Could this be a spirit? He wondered. Or perhaps the river's way of answering the loneliness I've carried. When their bodies met, there was no fear. There was no pulling away. She welcomed him, enveloped him, and for the first time in his life, Zuberi found peace in touch. The river amplified every sensation, their bodies moving together in a rhythm older than time itself. He touched her skin, tasted her sweetness, and felt his burdens melt into the current. She matched him, guiding him, grounding him. His strength found its home in her embrace, and in that moment, he knew what it was to be whole. As his breathing steadied, the woman slowly slipped from his arms, drifting back into the night like mist dissolving into air. Zuberi called out, but she was gone, leaving only the ripple of water and the lingering warmth of her touch. He stumbled out of the river, trembling with confusion and wonder. Who was she? Was she sent by the gods? Was it a dream? Sleep escaped him that night. His mind replayed the encounter over and over. His body, once burdened by shame, now pulsed with the memory of acceptance. By morning, the village awoke to prepare for the royal meeting. Zuberi greeted Princess Halima and Emir Bakari in his courtyard. The village elders gathered, and Chief Okafor presided over the welcome. Traditional kola nuts were broken, prayers were offered, and drums echoed softly in the background. When the moment came, Zuberi addressed the royal family, recounting the strange encounter he had the previous night. I met a woman at the river, he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. Her touch held no fear. For the first time, I was not rejected. I do not know her name, but she gave me something I have searched for my entire life. The village fell silent. Princess Halima could no longer contain herself. With trembling hands, she removed her veil. It was me, she confessed, her voice breaking. I was the woman at the river. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Halima continued, tears glistening in her eyes. I heard the river spirits calling me last night. I went to them. I knew. If I was to truly meet you, Zuberi, it had to be beyond the gaze of this world. It had to be without title, without fear, without shame. Zuberi's chest tightened as he stared at her, understanding now the ancient pull he had felt. The villagers looked to their elders. The priests whispered among themselves. A sacred union had occurred not just between a man and a woman, but between two destinies bound by the river itself. Zuberi stepped forward, his voice steady. Perhaps the gods do not curse us as we think. Perhaps they carve our pain to fit perfectly with another's. And the people of Oduala who once mocked him now knelt before the couple, honoring what the gods had joined. The sun rose high over Oduala, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The village buzzed with activity, drummers practicing, women plaiting fresh palm fronds, and the aroma of roasted yam and pepper soup filling the air. A union unlike any ever witnessed was about to take place. Princess Halima, the cursed daughter of Kalimba, and Zuberi, the shamed son of Oduala, had found healing not through rituals or prophets, but through each other. The elders declared it a divine joining, an answer to two ancient burdens that had haunted two distant lands. The priests of River Ioma performed cleansing rites at the water's edge. They announced to the people that when the river dried, it was to make way for something greater, a love that could renew the covenant of peace. Chief Okafor stood before the villagers with a voice that echoed like thunder through the trees. From shame they rose, from rejection they found glory. Let this day be remembered, not just for love, but for how the gods bind wounds with their own hands. The celebration began. Halima was adorned in a flowing wrapper of indigo and gold, her hair braided with cowries and river pearls. Zuberi wore a hand-woven wrapper dyed in forest green, with a red eagle feather, a symbol of strength and grace, placed above his brow. He looked regal, transformed, no longer carrying the stiffness of shame, but the ease of a man who had found home. Their wedding dance was unlike any the village had seen, not choreographed, not rehearsed. They moved as if they had always known the steps, bodies swaying in sync, hearts speaking through rhythm. Even the air itself seemed to pause. Women ululated, men pounded talking drums, children danced barefoot in the dust. Amir Bakari, though frail, stood proudly beside Chief Okafor. The two old men clasped hands, their eyes misty with shared pride. "We came as two kingdoms," the emir said, "but we leave as one family." During the feast, Halima stood beside Zuberi to address the crowd. Her voice was soft, but carried weight. "All my life I believed I was broken, but sometimes the gods do not fix what is broken. They bring you to someone broken in a way that fits." Tears ran freely in the crowd. Even Mama Uloma, Zuberi's mother, wept openly. Zuberi then turned to Halima and took her hand. "I was once a man women feared. Now I am a man one woman chose. That is more than any strength I ever lifted." And the union was sealed beneath the full moon. Villagers whispered that the river shone brighter that night than ever before, its reflection casting two figures side by side, Zuberi and Halima, no longer cursed, but chosen. And so began a new chapter. But the gods had not yet told the whole story. Weeks passed, and the joy of Zuberi and Halima's union remained fresh in the hearts of the people. Children followed them wherever they went, calling them the lovers of the gods. Women came from distant villages to touch Halima's garments, hoping it would break their own barrenness or heartbreak. Elders bowed to Zuberi, not because of fear, but because they saw in him the man they once failed to protect. But even sacred love must face its trial. During the season of the second rains, a troubling sign emerged. River Ioma began to swell unnaturally. The water, once gentle, now roared and churned. Farmers reported losing their boundary crops. The river priest was summoned. He approached the river with his staff, chanting softly. Then he turned to the elders with a grim face. "A sacrifice is still owed," he said. "The river returned for love. Yes, but love must now yield fruit. Until the womb of the chosen carries life, the river will not calm." Halima froze. Zuberi's fingers tightened around hers. The crowd buzzed with worry. That night in their hut, Halima cried silently, curled into herself. "What if the curse is not fully broken?" she whispered. "What if I can't conceive? What if the gods gave us passion, but not promise?" Zuberi knelt beside her, his forehead pressed to her belly. "You are not a vessel to be measured only by what you carry. If the river wants legacy, we will give it love. If it wants proof, it already has your tears." But the village was anxious. Rumors returned. Was Zuberi's body too much for creation? Would the princess lose another hope? To silence doubt, the priest organized a fertility ritual at the Umu Ocha shrine, where generations before had called upon the spirit mothers of the river. Zuberi and Halima, dressed in white wrappers, walked barefoot to the altar, hands clasped. As the drums beat, they poured sacred oil onto a carved calabash, symbolizing union, endurance, and new beginnings. Let our joining not be for performance, Halima prayed aloud, but for purpose. That night, as they returned to their hut, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain fell gently, and for the first time since their union, Halima slept with a strange flutter in her belly. Weeks turned into moons. And then, one dawn, as the birds sang over River Ioma and the mist curled like ancestral breath, Halima collapsed in her garden. She was not hurt, only tired, dazed, and glowing. The healer was summoned. She emerged from the hut with joyful tears. The princess carries life. The village erupted. Bells rang. Children danced. But for Halima and Zuberi, it was more than joy, it was confirmation that their pain had not only found healing, but had now become legacy. And River Ioma, once wild and roaring, returned to its gentle song, calm, clear, and forever flowing. As the moon cycles passed, Princess Halima's belly grew round, and with it the hearts of the villagers swelled with pride. The once isolated man, Zuberi, now walked with the ease of royalty, hand in hand with his wife, beneath the blessing of the gods and the adoration of his people. River Ioma, calm and fertile once more, sparkled each morning under the sun. Farmers' yields doubled. The midwives in the village reported an unusual number of safe births. The elders whispered, "The river has become fruitful because Halima is fruitful." One morning, as birds chirped over the sacred udala tree, a group of messengers from Kalimba arrived. They bore news from Emir Bakari. He was dying. His final wish was for Zuberi and Halima to return to Kalimba Kingdom so that he might see his daughter crowned and his legacy preserved before he joined the ancestors. Zuberi hesitated. He was now Oduala's river guardian, its heir of peace and prophecy. But Mama Ulama took his hands and whispered, "You have become bigger than this village. Go. Let the world see what love made from pain looks like." With the elders' blessing, Zuberi, Halima, and their newborn son, wrapped in leopard hide cloth, journeyed north. Along the way, crowds lined the roads, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man whose shame had become salvation. When they entered Kalimba, trumpets sounded from the minarets. Women laid out fabrics dyed in royal indigo. Emir Bakari, frail but smiling, sat on a golden seat as Halima entered, carrying her son. Zuberi followed, regal and poised. The old king's eyes welled with tears. "You have brought me peace," he whispered. "I feared I would leave this world watching you wither. But now, I see that the gods rewrote your fate." The naming ceremony of the child was held that very evening. The boy was named Ijegbumi, meaning what the river gave me. Then in a sacred courtyard under the starlit sky, Zuberi was crowned Crown Prince of Kalimba. It was the first time a man from the southern forest was given such honor in the desert kingdom. The chiefs chanted. The crowd wept. Even Emir Bakari bowed his head in thanks before taking his final breath days later, content and smiling. Zuberi, once mocked for his difference, now sat upon the golden mat of legacy. Halima, once feared for her curse, now nursed a child born from fulfillment. They returned often to Oduala, never forgetting their roots. There they planted 3 sacred trees near River Ihoma, one for pain, one for peace, and one for promise. The village children would gather beneath them, asking, "Mama Halima, is it true you found him at the river?" And she would smile, placing a hand on her husband's knee. "No, my children, I found him in my own heart, but the river helped us see it." Years flowed like River Ihoma after the first rain, steady, sacred, and full of life. Zuberi and Halima, once branded with shame and curses, became the most revered couple in the history of both Oduala and Kalimba Kingdom. Their love became more than a union, it became a legend, a parable whispered from grandmother to grandchild, from priest to pilgrim, from lovers who doubted themselves to souls still waiting for healing. Their home became a place of pilgrimage. Women burdened by infertility came to touch the cradle rock where Halima had once rested with her child. Young men came to drink from the riverbank stones, hoping to gain the kind of wisdom Zuberi carried, not just a body, but of heart. They had more children, 19 in all, each one born under a different moon, each one named for a season of their journey. Ejegbunmi, Oluwanifemi, Nura, Adana, Salihu, and so on. These children grew into warriors, healers, artists, and queens, stretching their legacy across the land like vines reaching towards sunlight. But more than the children or the crowns they wore, it was the story itself that endured. In the center of Oduala, a great mural was carved into the red stone wall beside River Ioma. It depicted a strong man kneeling in shame, a woman veiled in longing, a river once dry roaring back to life, a night under the moon where two bodies met, not in fear but in fate. Above the mural, the village elders inscribed the words, "When the gods give you pain, wait, they may be shaping your miracle." Even when Zuberi and Halima grew old, they would sit under the three sacred trees they had planted long ago. Children would still ask them to retell the story not for entertainment, but for hope. And Zuberi would laugh softly and say, "We were never cursed, we were being prepared." And Halima, now silver-haired and still radiant, would add, "The river didn't just give us water, it gave us each other." When they finally passed, just a few days apart, as if even in death they refused to be separated, the river overflowed for 7 days, cleansing the land, watering the crops, and marking their transition into legend. Villagers say that if you stand by River Ioma on a moonlit night and whisper a prayer of love, you might see two figures dancing in the water, a man once burdened and a woman once cursed, now eternal.